Good morning, everybody. Special good morning for those of us who might not be feeling quite as energetic as we could, who were at the Arsenal game last night. I know Carrie Brown is over there somewhere, waving at me. She's got the energy to wave, at least. Extremely exciting game, and it feels appropriate when we're still a little bit bleary-eyed from all the excitement of last night that David Dein, of course, most famous as that incredibly successful vice chair of Arsenal, joins us now. David, I said you're probably best known as vice chair of Arsenal during that time when the men's won 18 major trophies. But you were also instrumental in the establishment of the women's team and were president, indeed, of the women's team, who, of course, have gone on to become one of the most successful in the women's game. But you have to forgive me because I'm going to read this because this is just an edited selection of your highlights. International ambassador for the FA and ambassador for the Premier League, driving force behind the setup of the Premier League, and also president of the G14 group of European football clubs, and international ambassador of England's bid to host the World Cup in 2018. So there's a lot to get through. Let's start with the establishment of the women's team and the sort of partnership between you and the conversations you had with Vic Akers about the need for the women's team and how that came about.
Firstly, good morning, everybody, and thank you for that flattering introduction that I wrote for you.
Straight from your book.
Yes, the women, it's quite remarkable when I think about it now, but this was in the late 1990s. And I remember Vic Akers, who was the Arsenal first team kit man, came to me and he said, I've got some girls who want to play football. Do you think there's any chance we can discuss it with the board? I said, Vic, leave it to me. And of course, my wife happens to come from America, and I spent quite a bit of time going backwards and forwards, and I could see how the game was improving in the States. So I went to the board and I said, I'd like to propose that we have a women's team. And there was a hush. And don't forget, the board at the time was made up of bankers and stockbrokers and everybody. And one of them turned around to me and said, David, is this a publicity stunt? I said, no, this is for real. We want to do it, but we will have to subsidize it. And eventually I managed to get them to agree that we should actually form a women's team. And I can remember we used to play at the Hoxton Leisure Centre, the Britannia Leisure Centre in Hoxton. And if we were lucky, we'd get a dozen spectators, mainly the girls' parents. And that's where it all started. And then we played at Boreham Wood and we started the thing moving. And when you think now, last week they had 60,000 people, Arsenal women playing Spurs women. Well, the game's come a long way, Kelly.
It's come a long way, and in such a short space of time.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think, when you think back to that time, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago that you were effectively starting from scratch.
Yes, everything's got to have a start. And it was difficult because one day we couldn't just play, Arsenal just couldn't play, we need to encourage all the other teams, and that was hard work. Particularly, by the way, Manchester United, who were very reluctant at the time. And then they came on board. And once you get a few of the more glamorous clubs on board, everybody has to follow. And the rest, of course, is history. And when I look back at those days, they were difficult days because we couldn't get sponsorship. There was zero television. So the clubs had to subsidize everything. Now it's all changed.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the subsidising, I mean, you were a sponsor yourself as well. There were basic necessities that weren't being catered for.
Absolutely true. And of course, the girls were part-time. We gave them jobs in the laundry, at the time, just to keep some money in their pockets so that they could actually have some cash to travel for training. It was a hard education program, but when you look back now and you see what's been achieved, it has been absolutely sensational. And it's one of the projects that I'm so proud of being involved in my life.
And as you say, they have gone on to this incredible success, but those early days, and you've alluded to it there, it wasn't just about Arsenal having a women's team, it was about having the kind of, cross-club interest and the cross-club determination to set up enough clubs to be able to form a league. And there were a few incarnations before we got to the WSL that we know now.
Yeah, that's so true. But now you can see how the game is going, and the genie is out of the bottle now. You know, it's got its own life. And I often use when anybody talks to me about the women's game, I use this expression: the train has left the station and it's gathering speed. So jump on it.
It's true, and you hear a lot. I mean, I know Karen Carney's review was mentioned earlier, and she, as part of that review, said sponsorship deals in the women's game actually deliver more to sponsors than they do in the men's game in terms of percentages,
Well, it's
if
a whole
not
new
necessarily
audience.
in numbers.
Kelly, it's a new audience. When you see the spectators that came to the Emirates Stadium the other day, no, they're not the same as coming to the men's game, and it's refreshing because you're getting families coming, and the whole atmosphere is different.
Yeah, it's a completely different crowd, as you say, who are coming to those games, attracted by this fantastic football. But when you talk about the train and the fact that it's gathering speed, it's not quite there just yet. And I know in Karen's review, she said, in some ways, the women's game should still be treated as a startup, in that it's not self-sustaining just yet, but it's come a long way.
When you think in the States, Kansas City this very week are opening a purpose-built women's stadium which cost $120 million for women. What does that tell you? And it won't be long, I predict this, in the next year or two, we will see the first £1 million player. You'll see a transfer for £1 million. Do you know when the first men's transfer was in England? If I'm not mistaken, it was Trevor Francis from Birmingham to Nottingham Forest in 1979. That's 45 years ago. It's taken us 45 years to get up there. We will see a £1 million transfer. It could have been Alessia Russo, right? Who went from Manchester United. She was free, right? It's going to happen. You know, you've got to think, where is the game going?
Yeah, that development of the stadium as well, the first women's professional purpose-built sports stadium, 20,000-seater.
Yeah.
It's going to be with all the facilities that go around that.
And what Angel City have done in America. You know, we're always 10, 20 years behind the States with these sort of things, because they're the best at marketing. Don't ever worry about that. You know, they make sure that it's an event. It's not just a football match. They build everything around it. It is an event. And certainly when we were building the Emirates Stadium, I learned a lot of what was going on in the States. And you take Angel City in America, at Los Angeles. They are gold standard. That only started 3 years ago. The valuation of their club is $180 million today.
Is it?
Yes. So if we've got any sponsors out there, any TV companies, right, the train has left the station.
It is extraordinary, the numbers that we're starting to talk about within the women's game. And having been part, as you said, you know, you were instrumental in the development of the Emirates, instrumental and hugely involved in the startup of the Premier League. So as much as the kind of pathway that women's football could go down, you can see the blueprint from that, but are there also pitfalls, do you think?
Well, you could say anything, but I think it's got its own momentum. It's got its own life now. I know, I go around a lot of schools giving talks, and I'm always asking the question, how many girls here play football? More and more hands are going up, Kelly, and it's very refreshing. And I can only see it developing. It's positive.
Yeah, I've just fallen into the trap myself of sort of comparing the women's game to the men's game. But as you've said, they're very different propositions. Is this an opportunity for women's football to develop separately, almost not quite as a different
parallel.
sport, but as an independent sport?
It will run in parallel. Why not? And it should, and we will see it. And I'm very bullish on women's football. And you can see what happens obviously with the Lionesses winning the Euros in 2022. That gave a whole lift to the country. And great performance in the World Cup in Australia. I had a wonderful month there in Australia and New Zealand. I mean, it was a brilliant World Cup. And you're going to see more and more. There's more interest than ever before in women's football.
And particularly, as you say, at Arsenal, where home games are going to be played at the Emirates, where we've already had sellout crowds at the Emirates for various games. This isn't a one-off. This is something that is being built consistently. But you also marry that up with other teams in the WSL who are getting like a few hundred spectators to their games. So how do you try to level that?
Well, that's up to the manager. They've got to take a view. Every club, it's his own concern. They've got to decide, do they want to have women's football as part of their organisation? And I believe they have to. And you're seeing more and more clubs now participating. More and more clubs are participating in the Women's World Cup. And interested around the world now, there's only a few countries that aren't playing, but they haven't got women's football teams. Never had that 20 years ago. Don't forget, we're still far behind the States. I think it was only in, if I'm not mistaken, Title IX broke the mold in 1972 in America, where it was an obligation for women and boys and girls, men and women, to share the same sporting facilities at college level. And that was really a start.
It's going to be fascinating to see how it all develops. And I think the phrase that you used when we had a chat prior to this conversation was that the owners have to show bravery.
That's exactly right. That's the word. They have to show bravery, have to show commitment, and have to show vision. And I believe, yes, they may think it's a bit of a speculation. They'll be proved right. You've got to speculate to accumulate.
And do you think the ones that don't show bravery will be left behind?
They'll be left behind. They will. Because I see it on a daily basis, Kelly, that, we want to see the youngsters, more girls playing the game. And we are doing it. But that needs better coaches, better facilities.
Yeah. And it needs to be there, and the support system needs to be there. Women in football have set up their Open Doors agenda, which is in part in response to the comments made by FIFA during the World Cup about women pushing doors open. But there has to be, as you've alluded to, the support network there, and it is still very much a game that is run by men at the top. So what do you think that those men in those positions can do to help support not just the women's game, but women working in the industry?
Well, I think the men's game, the senior players have a duty, in my opinion, to help the women's game as well. I think there has to be cross-fertilisation. I want to see a lot more of that, a lot more of interest. I know we see at Arsenal, a lot of the star players are now taking interest in the women's game. That's always a great start. And it's happening, Kelly.
It is, and that's just at the playing level as well. I mean, there are women in this audience who are working in all different aspects of the game, and are, there has very definitely been a lot of progress. There feels like there is still some work to be done. And how important do you think that the support of the people who are already in place is?
The old story that Rome is not built in a day, but you've got to put the first brick in the wall. And that's where we come back to bravery. You've got to have, is women's football, the question every club should ask themselves, is women's football going to be, is it going to improve over the years? Are we going to get more interest in it? Are we going to get more spectators? Are we going to get better players? The answer to each of those questions is yes, yes, and yes.
And how do we take the success of the Lionesses, of some of those teams in the WSL, and how do we create a kind of drip-down effect, a trickle-down effect, so that young girls have better access to better sporting facilities and to better opportunities?
But I think it is happening, Kelly. In all the clubs that I know, they've all got academies. The girls are getting involved. They're getting proper coaching, better coaching than ever before. The facilities are there for them. Yeah, it's got to be embraced.
It's exciting listening to you, because you're describing this juggernaut that cannot be
happening.
stopped.
I agree. And I feel very proud that I saw it right from the onset, that I jumped on the train early.
It strikes me as something of a theme from your career, David, is seeing these opportunities and these developments.
Yeah. I've got my own personal motto, which is the motto of the turtle. And wherever I go and talk, I give this to students, and indeed in prisons, that the motto of the turtle is, you don't get anywhere unless you stick your neck out. and that's what it is.
Yes. And you have to make yourself vulnerable.
You've got to be brave. Otherwise, they will get left behind. That's a warning, right?
David, one of the other things that's very important to you is your twinning project, and this twins professional football clubs with their local prison. So tell me a little bit about, well, first of all, why did you become involved with and set up the charity?
Thank you for asking. This is a little advert for my own personal charity, the Twinning Project, which started life in this very room in 2018, where the then Minister for Prisons, Rory Stewart, opened it on our behalf. And what it does, it twins professional football clubs with a local prison, where the football club, every football club's got a charitable foundation. They put their coaches into a local prison to help the offenders getting a coaching course, getting a level 1 coaching course at the end of it, which hopefully when they come out, they can get a job. And that eventually will reduce reoffending and save lives. Believe it or not, yesterday, because it's been so popular over here, we've now got 40, 50 clubs involved in England now. We've actually expanded it. Yesterday, and I only came back late last night, sadly, I missed the first half of the Arsenal game, but I was in Rome as we started a project with AS Roma and their local prison, Rebibia Women's Prison. There were 16 offenders, women offenders, on the course with another 50 on a wait list. That tells you. And there are, in England, we have 113 prisons, 90,000 people in prison, 5,000 women in prison in this country. And in the 10 women's prisons, we've got courses going on in all of them, and they're all oversubscribed.
It's incredible to hear, and you are extraordinarily busy in your life. Why is this such a passion project for you in particular?
It's funny how these things evolve. It really started because I was on something called Speakers for Schools, which is a charitable, probably heard Robert Peston started it years ago. And I've been on that program for about 10, 12 years, going around state schools giving talks. And then I thought, well, where else is there a captive audience? And I thought, prisons. What about going into prisons? And after knocking on the door of the Ministry of Justice and everywhere else, finally, after about 8 months, I finally gave me a prison to go into at HMP Rochester in Kent. And I was going around the prisons. I'm thinking, what is football doing in prisons? Nothing. I think, well, the offenders are bored. Let's give them something. Let's give them a football course. Let them at least encourage them to do something when they come out and to stop reoffending. And that's how it all started.
Yeah, it's an incredible project, and I know something that you're
But it does need money. This is
very proud of.
But we are very short of money because I'm afraid we don't get enough from the government, so we have to have fundraisers. In fact, we've got another fundraiser coming up soon in this very room again, which will be for the referees about VAR talking. It's a fundraising event, so you're all welcome to come. It's only £1,500 a table.
Probably got that rattling around in pockets and things like that. But it's something that you're rightly very proud of and is really making a difference. I'm not 100% sure where we are for time at the moment, but I do want to, I know we're going to take some questions for people from people from the floor. But before we do that, I do want to ask you about your predictions for this season. Because Arsenal are top of the league.
Or the WSL.
As things stand, well, and they're still very well placed in terms of the WSL title as well. This could be an incredible season for Arsenal.
Yes, I'm going to fudge the answer there by saying I think both the men and the women's team have got a good opportunity this year.
Yeah.
That's where I say. Can I just talk about the men's team? I must have, you may not remember this, Kelly, but it was, I think last year, Kelly actually was the anchor for Premier League Hall of Fame. Do you remember that at the Shard? And they were inducting Arsene Wenger and Alex Ferguson into the Hall of Fame. Alex couldn't make it. There was only Arsene there. So Kelly was interviewing Arsene, and there was a lovely question, and she said to Arsene, "Tell me about the respect you have for Sir Alex." And Arsene thought about it, and he said, "That came later."
He is always charming, Arsene Wenger, and always there with the right answer, as you have been as well, David. I'd love to take some questions from the floor if anybody has anything that they would like to ask. Right, now this is part of what we should be doing here, is it not being shy?
Yes.
And this is supposed to be a safe space where people feel willing. There's one just there, and I'll come to you in a second. Oh, there's a microphone.
Hi there, my name's Nirali. You've spoken wonderfully about the access that women and girls now have in the world of football. When we break down women and girls, and obviously we've got a lot of ethnic diverse background as well, how can we make sure that we are equitable across all women and girls so that every single person from every single background has got the same opportunity to play for example, the Arsenal women's team, to play in the WSL, to get to that elite level that everybody aspires to? Thank you.
That's a very good question. And I think you're seeing the open doors policy. You're now seeing more and more clubs engaging in women's football. There'll be more opportunities at grassroots level for youngsters to play. And I've got grandchildren. My granddaughters are playing football now at the age of 5 and 6. They're seeing it on television. They want to be as good as the men, right? There are opportunities. So be strong.
And a very good friend of ours, Ian Wright, his granddaughter is extraordinary, Rafi. I don't know if you've seen any of the clips of her on social media. She's just incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are definitely those brilliant young talents coming through. Oh, yes. Sorry, I said I'd come to you next. Sorry, go on.
Hi, David. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. You talked about helping the women's game as a whole. How do we trickle down from Arsenal, Man City, Man U, down to teams like Bristol City, who are really struggling right now? Are they going to get relegated this season and lose a lot of their funding and a lot of their players move to the big clubs? How are we going to get that trickle-down effect?
The funding is always the key. And this is where you do need benefactors, you do need sponsors, television. There has to be enough money spilling down. Even now, in the men's game, between the Premier League and the Football League, there is always that tension of how much money can trickle down to keep everybody in business. And that's the same. But I would hope there's so much interest now in the women's game that their money will be found. And it can only really either come from central funds, it can come either from the government, Stuart Andrew mentioned, more and more money is being pumped in to encourage women to play sport generally.
Yes. Oh, this way.
Hi, thanks. My name's Emily Robinson. I'm the Chief Executive of a charity called London Sport, and our focus is how we get inactive Londoners into sport. We know there's a huge amount of interest for girls and women to play sport, but it's actually huge pressure at grassroots facilities. I found it very interesting that you mentioned that Arsenal women started playing at a local leisure centre. We know that leisure centres and local authority facilities are under enormous strain.
Yeah.
What ideas do you have about how we can capture the resources that are going in to make sure that at the grassroots level it becomes sustainable and all those girls who want to play get an opportunity?
I think the fact that the lights have come open, and particularly the best advert we could have had was the Lionesses winning the Euros in 2022. That turned the lights on, not just for football, but for the nation. People who weren't even interested in football suddenly became interested in football and be interested in women's football, because we suddenly saw an England team winning a major trophy. It's taken a long time to get there. And we did really well in Australia. So there is more interest coming. One's got to be patient. It will happen. It will evolve. And you've just got to, I'm afraid I find the same in my charity. You've got to go out with your begging bowl, I'm afraid, to everybody who's interested and anybody who's interested to try and help support it. We'll talk about it privately.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
It's funny.
Hello. I've got the hello. Thanks for the discussion today. My name's Sarah Wilkin. I'm part of the new Women in Football Mentorship Programme. I'm working on making football carbon neutral. My question to you, David, is you mentioned 25 years ago the boards took a lot of convincing to kind of take on the women's teams and things like that. What do you think kind of in the city, the sponsors were the money flow is. What is the opinion now? How have you seen that shift, and what do you think is the main interest or barriers at the moment?
Well, the interest, thank you, it's a good question. It is television that makes stars. You're in the right business, Kelly. You know that. So once television gets behind it, and a lot of credit has to go to BBC, because they didn't put it on BBC, they put it on BBC One, right? When you see the Euros and the World Cup, they are promoting it very heavily indeed. They've taken a view. Their viewership 5 years ago wasn't anything like what it is today. And, one's got to just be brave and think of the future.
Yes. It's all this side of the room. I don't know if this is just...
Hi, David.
Hi. Oh, hi, Rachel. Before we go, this lady, in case you
No,
don't...
let's not go there.
Sorry.
Oh, no, now I really want to hear Rachel.
Hold on. We owe this lady a big debt. Rachel Pavlou is the hardest working person at the FA. I tell you, she's day and night.
Okay, thank you.
And what's more, she does a fantastic job. She is my go-to person. When I've got any question about women's football, it's to Rachel.
Thank you. That was very nice of you, but that wasn't the reason I stood up.
Sorry?
So I know you spend a lot of time abroad, and you spend a lot of time with FIFA. So my question is, if tomorrow they asked you to become FIFA president for a month, what would you do to help women's football? What's the one big thing you'd do to help women's football?
Well, if I were to become FIFA president?
Yeah.
Well...
You'd promote Rachel, wouldn't you?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you would definitely be my vice president. It is actually going in the right direction. I know, FIFA went through a torrid time in 2010. It's recovering. I think the house has been cleaned up. I think Gianni Infantino is doing a good job. And certainly when you talk about women's football, because Sarai Behrman there, and Nadine Kessler at UEFA does a fantastic job with UEFA women's football. We're seeing so much more resources going into it. I'm not sure I could really do a lot more. Obviously, there's campaigns I'm on. I'm on a big campaign at the moment about timekeeping. I'm on campaigns about penalty shootouts. Can I just wave the flag on this one? So even last night we saw again. So where were the penalties taken last night? They were actually taken at the end opposite to the Porto fans.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Yeah, North Back. Yeah, it's clock end, weren't they?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, sorry, no, they were at the opposite
end. Yes.
Yeah. And I saw it here at this very stadium in the Championship playoff. Probably the most valuable game in English football is the men's playoffs between the Championship and the Premier League. That game is worth £150 million. It was Luton against Coventry. The penalties happened to be at the Luton end, which I think is unfair to the Coventry fans who are stuck at the other end, can't see what's going on, and don't have their players shooting in front of their goal. I want to see penalties taken at each end.
So you think we should retake last night's penalties then?
No, no, I don't. But to be fair to the fans, particularly the fans and the players, you're taking a penalty, Kelly. Would you rather take a penalty in front of your own fans or the opposition fans?
Well, you're right. We saw it last night with the Arsenal fans.
Absolutely. So why don't we? And it's very simple. You've got 5 officials, 5 professionals there, referees. One goes at one end, one goes at... I'm not thinking of the referee going backwards and forwards. That's nonsense. So you've got 5. One goes at one end, one goes at the other. You take them alternately. So Luton would have taken their penalty at their end. Coventry would have taken it at their end. Anyway, so that's these sort of things going on, and the offside rule needs to be improved, which Arsene Wenger's working on. You're going to see a new offside rule, I think, or amendment to it coming in the next year or two. It needs it because it's too contentious. VAR needs improving, and you'll get more communication. These are the sort of things that I would be working on, trying to push these new things to make it more acceptable to the fans, and obviously to push women's football.
Yes. How you've got a watch on? What time have you making on your? Thank you. Thanks.
First of all, it's been amazing listening to you. So I'm like the ambassador for South Asian women in Nottingham and trying to get them more engaged in football. I think women in football has come amazingly over the years, and it's established a platform that we couldn't probably comprehend. But I feel that even though we have diversity and inclusion, I think when it comes to the South Asian Muslim community, we're kind of getting left behind. And like you said, the train has left the platform and it's at a high pace. I feel that it will be a very hard catch-up game to get to where women are. And that gap will just get wider and wider and wider. And maybe those opportunities will be harder to reach when we're working with that kind of community. Apart from the normal barriers, excuse me, there's other cultural and other barriers that they have to overcome. So I think women in football, just generally, not take a responsibility, but kind of reach out to them and pull them onto the train, and not just wait for the next train, which could be another 13, 15 years. So, and I know there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of drive, they want to be on that train, but unfortunately, they won't give the right directions.
Yeah, the faster and the further it goes, the harder it is to jump on.
They're on the wrong platform at the moment, so they need someone to tell them that's a platform.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, what would you like to see?
First of all, I like to see, when it comes to sponsorships, I think if there was someone, a sponsorship that represented the South Asian community, I think also visually, I think sometimes you have to see it to believe it. When it comes to media on all platforms, I think there needs to be someone visually available for people to say, this is a territory we can go into, this is the way forward, because it is. And I've seen a lot of passion and drive, but because it's not out there, we're still, looking around to see, is there someone that looks like us? Because my daughter plays at 14, and for her, it's still a quite dark and lonely road that she's going through. But I feel as women in football, we all need to work together to help each other, and see how we can bring someone on the platform that represents that group of community, because there's an existence of them in the UK and all over the world. And they, just want to be on the same platform. But I think it's just too much of a gap to wait another 15 to 20 years for other girls and women to miss out on the opportunity. So I think they just need a lifting hand to bring them to the same level.
Yeah, but you always need a champion. You need somebody behind it, somebody high up.
Someone to support.
Who believes in it,
yeah.
Right? We could have said the same thing in England. Don't forget, we were 25, 30 years behind the States. They had a great advantage. And I'm happy to say this publicly, I think we've caught up with them. I think the Lionesses would give America a very good game any day of the week now. Yes, it takes time.
Yeah, and but the increase in visibility is something that is going to be crucial to developing the representation that you want to see in the game, and the opportunities for young girls.
Whether it's workforce, whether it's on the pitch, I think it's still non-existent, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Ibra's got a question.
Oh yes.
One last question. Go.
As the chair, I have the right to extend for 2 more minutes. But David, you are one of the best networked, most well-known leaders in football. And we have a lot of aspiring leaders in the room, men and women, who are looking to advance in their careers. So lots of people work in men's football, not necessarily women's football. One big advice: how do we navigate the intricacies of football as women or men earlier on in our careers?
Yeah, you've just got to be persistent, tenacious, determined. And I believe in every successful person, Ibru, that I've ever met, they've all had the same 3 qualities: hard work, vision, and courage. And that's what everybody needs in the room. You've got to have the vision that you want to go for. You've got to get a goal and you've got to go for it.
It's a great message to end on, I think. David, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Great pleasure.